What is up, Summoners? My name is Nathan Ng, and today I'm going to be running you through our high ELO tier list for patch 11.1. These lists are a little bit different from our normal patch rundown because they're crafted around the best players and take into account champion strengths and elite levels of play. Make sure you check out our initial patch rundown for a complete list of changes, or if you're more interested in the power of champions overall rather than in high skilled brackets. Before we start though, just know that we're giving away stuff like riot points, coaching, ProGuide points, ProGuide subscriptions, and so much more. All you have to do to participate is subscribe and join our Discord using the link in the description. Then just check out the giveaway tab. Now let's go ahead and just jump right into the video. Let's run it down from the top lane first. Kicking off the changes is Gnar. He got massive buffs this patch. His Q's Megaform slow has been increased from 15 to 35% to 30 to 50%. The damage increased from 5 to 165 to 25 to 205. His Miniform E's attack speed duration also increased from 4 to 6 seconds, and his Megaform's E range increased from 600 to 675. With all of these buffs, we think Gnar will become a much safer pick. As a ranged champion, Gnar is expected to be a passable blind pick, but that hasn't really been the case since he's been on the weaker side. With massive buffs to his damage and utility, Gnar should have much more presence during the laning phase and also deal much more damage in the late game as well. Even solely based on the fact that Gnar's laning is stronger than before, we've gone ahead and moved him up to the A tier. The big ol' rock has gotten nerfed this patch. Malphite's W armor ratio has been lowered from 15 to 10%, and his E's damage armor ratio has been decreased from 40% to 30%. We don't think that these nerfs are enough to take Malphite out the OP tier list yet. His incredible teamfighting presence and agency makes him far too relevant. Malphite has been too powerful of a laner, and even a little bit weaker, he'll prove to be a reliable tank that can always impact the flow of games. Before we move any further, this takes us to our question of the day. Which champion do you never expect to be an OP pick in high elo, and why? For me, I can't ever see Udyr ever being a pick or ban champion. He's niche and can catch players by surprise, but he's just way too dated. Maybe after rework things can change though. Let me know your answers in the comments down below, and let's go ahead and jump right back to those changes. Next is a nerf to Pantheon. His health regen was reduced from 10 to 9, and his empowered W scaling has been reduced from 135 to 165% to 120 to 165%. Although he'll be weaker, high elo players abuse the fact that Pantheon is already a dominant laner and can use this to their advantage. They can roam elsewhere on the map, creating leads regardless of whether or not they're able to pick up solo kills in a lane. As a result, we've actually decided to move Pantheon up into the OP tier as he's still dominating high elo solo queue. Another notable change that we made is that we shifted Akali down to the B tier. As she's much weaker than she was at the start of the preseason, Akali has started struggling a little bit. While she was blatantly broken before, she now requires good matchup in order to create a lead that she needs in order to carry games. That, or you just have to be a lot better than your opponent. Although Akali's ban rate remains at an all-time high, her win rate in the top lane has dropped below 47% in high elo, and we think it's time to drop her down to the tier list. The final change I like to note is that Kayle has been dropped to the A tier for similar reasons. She is not as blatantly broken as before, and there's actually risk involved when picking her. Although Kayle scales incredibly well and is a solid carry when she manages to hit her late game, her results can heavily vary, and thus, we need to knock her down a notch. Thus, our OP picks in the top lane are Malphite, Camille, Aatrox, and Pantheon, followed by Darius, Maokai, Ornn, and Shen. That's right, if you caught that, Aatrox is indeed an OP pick in elite levels of play. In mid-elo and around low diamond, players just see him as a very good or very strong pick, but this presence in elite play is much stronger. A big reason is that the other OP picks are blatantly OP and get banned often. As a top laner, you're often left thinking, well, if all the actual OP champions are banned, I guess I'll just pick Aatrox. Aatrox is a stable rock right now, aside from quite literally Malphite, just because he can always be relevant. Especially in higher elo, where players abuse counter matchups hard enough to make their opponents irrelevant. Having a safe pick like Aatrox handy is invaluable. Next up, let's run through the jungle. Kicking off in the jungle, we got a change to Fiddlesticks. His WCD has been increased from 9 to 7 seconds to 10 to 8 seconds. Although he did just get nerfed, Fiddlesticks has been seeing a good amount of success in the jungle. We've been placing him too low and decided to move him up to the S tier as a result. This nerf shouldn't be enough to significantly impact his win rate. Ivern has also faced some nerfs this patch. His Q's cooldown has been reverted back from 14 to 10 seconds, while his E shield ratio has been lowered from 90% AP to 80%. However, like Fiddlesticks, Ivern has been finding a great amount of success. So much so that we've also had to move him up to the S tier. Ivern's incredible utility and low-cost build allow him to quickly impact games after finishing just a couple of his items. Graves' AD has been lowered by 2 this patch as well. He has been one of the strongest picks in the game for a while now, but this nerf likely won't be able to drop him down from the OP tier list yet. We'll have to wait and see, however, because even small numbers like this have historically had significant impacts on champions. Believe it or not, 2 AD, who would have guessed? Next, Taliyah has had her passive movement speed decrease from 20 to 45% to 12 to 40%. After some buffs to help her out in the jungle, Taliyah has once again been popping off, and we've decided to move her into the S tier this patch. These nerfs will definitely impact her quickly to roam across the map and go for some very quick ganks. However, with her damage untouched, we still think that she'll remain a powerful pick. Next up is Yi. Master Yi's Q cooldown has been increased from 18 to 14 seconds to 18 to 16, and while that is a pretty big nerf, we don't think it'll have much impact on him for high elo. He's already a pretty risky pick and will remain a niche choice for certain players. He's not the same monster as he is in low elo, so we'll go ahead and leave Master Yi in the B tier for now. Our OP jungle picks this patch are Graves, Kha'Zix, Nunu, and Olaf. Olaf has been a monster jungler this time around because of how much damage he can dish out and because of how ridiculously fast his clear speed is. Following closely in the S tier are Hecarim, Evelynn, Kayn, Lilia, Kindred, Taliyah, Elise, Fiddlesticks, and Ivern. If you're looking to pick up any of these junglers, I suggest head up a coach at our website. We have tons of excellent ones that can teach you a thing or two about pathing or even how to clear camps as fast as possible. That'll be wrapping up the jungle though, so let's head over to the mid lane next. Let's begin with Qiyana. Her base AD has been increased from 64 to 66, while her HP regeneration has gone up from 8.5 to 9 per 5 to 0.65 to 0.9. With the extra damage and regeneration, Qiyana will prove to be a much more competent laner, and thus, we're going to be bumping her into the A tier. Qiyana has been doing pretty well in high elo specifically, and we still think that this will remain the trend this patch. Ryze's Q mana cost has been lowered from 40 to 32 based on level. This is another buff for the blue guy, and we place them in the B tier for this patch. With a lowered mana cost, Ryze players should have an easier time in the mid game when they're trying to finish stacking up their tier. In the late game, however, this buff probably won't have much of an impact. Now let's talk about Yasuo. His AD per level was lowered from 3.2 to 2.2. Also, his passive now increases crit strike chance from all sources by 150% instead of 100%. Excess critical strike to AD conversion has been lowered from 0.5 per 1% to 0.4 per 1% in compensation. Yasuo will be placed in the A tier as a result of these changes. These changes make it so much easier for Yasuo players to hit 100% crit chance, and they have to do so with only 2 items now. This in itself should open up a lot more flexibility when playing Yasuo, and players essentially have another slot open to tech up whatever item they need. Yone has received the exact same changes, except his AD per level went down from 3 to 2. With the exact same reasoning, we place Yone in the S tier. In Elite play, Yone is a heavily contested pick because of his high damage output and because his mobility doesn't rely on minions. As many players figure out what build works on him, we're certain that he'll remain a top tier pick headed into this patch as well. Our OP picks for the mid lane this patch are Echo, Anivia, and Pantheon, followed by Fizz, Victor, Zed, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Malphite, Zoe, Talon, Yone, and Seraphine in the S tier. Pantheon, in spite of his nerfs, is going to be ridiculously powerful as a mid laner. His damage is far too high for any mid laners to actually deal with, and thus, they simply have to concede lane priority. After backing down from fights, they get pushed in and Pantheon gets to roam on other lanes simply by winning early skirmishes because of his immense power. Seraphine is included in the S tier this time around because of the nerfs to burst damage. Damage and mini items have been moved into stats rather than burst damage. Because of this, Seraphine is a much safer spot than before and will be more likely a reliable safe pick. They'll be covering up the mid lane, so let's go ahead and move to the bottom lane next. In the bot lane, we got some love for the marksman who really needs it the most. Let's start off with Sivir. Sivir's base mana has been increased from 284 to 325. And her Q's damage has been increased from 35 to 95 plus 70 to 130% bonus AD to 40 to 100 plus 75 to 135% bonus AD. Unfortunately, with such a small buff, we'll have to leave Sivir where she is. Currently, she still gets picked once in a while because she can provide value with her ultimate and because she has some great wave clear. In specific matchups, Sivir is able to find success, but in the grand scheme of things, she is significantly underperforming. Varus has gotten another buff this patch around as well. His Q's mana cost has been reduced by 5 and the cooldown lowered from 18 to 10 to 16 to 10. Again, these buffs are too small to make a huge difference for him, even in the high elo where we'll be leaving him in the C tier. Varus feels like he's outclassed by many other marksmen. If you want the utility, there are many other picks who can also have more impact than him, and thus, he falls short of the pack. Next is Zaya. Her E's cooldown has been lowered from 12 to 8 to 10 to 8, while the mana cost was lowered from 40 to 30. It's been pretty rough for Zaya, but the difference between a 12 and a 10 second cooldown is pretty huge for her E. Although we're leaving Zaya in the C tier for now, our analysts think that this change might actually be good enough to move her up a tier in high elo. Zaya is also known for that giant chunk of health that she can take out with her E, as well as the fact that she can also provide some extra crowd control with it. With this cooldown lowered, it's definitely possible that Zaya might be more playable by those who are very comfortable with her. In the bot lane, our OP picks are Jhin, Kai'Sa, and Misfortune. Following them in the S tier are Ashe, Draven, Ezreal, Vayne, and Samira. We've actually dropped Samira down and replaced her with Misfortune. MF's back up there because her laning phase is so ridiculously powerful. She's a lane bully that is incredibly difficult to deal with, and we think she's just as impactful as the other OP picks. The reason we dropped Samira down is that with the recent nerfs to her passive, she relies much more heavily on her support. Since its usage is a little bit more conditional than before, we're seeing that her impact in the games have dropped a bit. However, she still remains in the S tier because of her absurd ban rates, illustrating that players still dislike playing against her. That being said, let's wrap up things with the support changes. For supports, we've seen one big change to note, and that's to Karma. Her shield on her E has been increased from 80 to 200 to 80 to 240. While this is a huge buff to her mid and late game, Karma has been underperforming far too much. For utility, there's so many other better picks like Lulu, Nami, and even Seraphine. Compared to other enchanters, there doesn't really seem to be a reason to pick Karma over them. She's faced with heavy nerfs in the past that made her feel much weaker. This is due to the fact that people keep spamming her in the top lane. Karma used to be so strong because her numbers were so good. Lower cooldowns made her an exceptional lane bully, but those are things of the past, and Karma just hasn't been doing so hot. Let's talk about some other changes as well. We placed Rell in the B tier as she isn't performing exceptionally well. However, we do expect her win rates to slowly rise as players get better with her. There are risks involving picking Rell, and she's not a champion who's designed to do well against every team comp. Pyke and Yuumi have also been moved down to the B tier just because of how they match up against other champions who fill similar roles. In terms of engaged supports, Pyke feels a little bit too flimsy, and if you want the damage from a support, you got Maokai with his ridiculously new AP build. Pyke isn't necessarily bad, but he's a lot riskier to pick than champions who can always be useful like Leona and Thresh because of their straightforward utility built into their kits. Yuumi also seems a little bit outclassed by her other enchanters. Thank God. I really do not enjoy playing against this cat. Finally, Senna has to move down to the C tier because she's been underperforming. This season just doesn't look too great for her, and itemization can be really tricky. Finally, Pantheon is once again an A tier pick because of his flex potential. The fact that Pantheon is so strong in solo lanes right now creates a ton of concern during the draft phase for the enemy teams. When he can even be flexed into the support role, it gets so difficult to counterpick him, and he's still an okay support in spite of nerfs. Thus, our OP picks for supports are Leona, Maokai, and Thresh. Following them in the S tier are Lulu, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Nautilus, and Seraphine. Like we mentioned in our patch rundown earlier this week, Maokai has been a ridiculous pick this season. AP Maokai is back, and we haven't seen it, just be warned because he deals even more damage than before and still brings a ton of crowd control to the table. Notable picks in the S tier are Janna and Bard. They boast very high win rates, and if our 3 OP picks weren't so strong, our list could have potentially had them included instead. That wraps up our high ELO tier list for patch 11.1. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm not sure if you guys have recognized it, but my voice has been dying slowly throughout this entire video. So I really apologize for that, but thank you for bearing with me as I try getting out the information. Leave any comments that you have for us, as we love to read them. As I mentioned before, check out our link in the Discord. We're growing our community, and that giveaway is still fair game. So until next time, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.